And
how'd you get involved in armor?
The convoys, we had to control the convoys. We had to have firefights along the way. One of the facts that I don't even tell the folks here at the Legion is that part of the role of convoy commander was to reconnoiter the routes. Okay, and you did that by helicopter. Yeah, I personally was shot down 3 times in helicopters, and there's nothing more sickening than auto-rotating around your body as you're sinking down, crashing into a swamp. Yeah, so you know, each time you have to get up and say, okay, I got to do it again. Yeah. One time I actually went down in a swamp in a helicopter because it couldn't carry the weight with the cloud cover. You couldn't carry the weight, and so the pilots had to go down. This was a squad transport helicopter. It's a Boeing CH-48, I think. And
Twin rotor?
yeah, twin rotor, which really made me mad. I had to let a squad of Marines out in enemy territory in favor of the materials that were going to a general's mess. And I said, whoa, wait a minute. That's pretty nasty. So I got out with them, and we made our way back to the compound. But yeah, helicopters and me, we've had quite a story in our life. Ultimately, as fate would have it, when I got out of the Marine Corps, my first opportunity in business was as a management consultant with Booz Allen here in Washington. And that lasted about 6 months, where I helped the Marine Corps in its strategies in a wartime situation. But at the end of 6 months, I took a position in Tehran, Iran, automating the construction of helicopters for the Shah of Iran. So here, helicopters have played an important role in my existence, and my role in the military. So all in all, the Marine Corps, which is still in me, never leaves, is one of memories of combat, losing lieutenants and other Marines, and basically fighting for our country. It has to be said that I went over there as a brandishing hawk, full of the vigor of a young man ready to defend our nation. I came back as a singed pigeon, a whole different attitude towards the war, towards its impact. And as I may have told you, when I did come back and meet my family just south of San Francisco, I was putting on my uniform because I was so proud to take them out to dinner. And my mother said, "No, son, you cannot wear your uniform in San Francisco." Yeah, an hour later, we were going into the restaurant, and the Navy commander was being egged. And yeah, that's what happened. If you don't have the will of the society, much less the will of the soldiers, you don't win a war. And we've learned that lesson in Afghanistan. And it's even tougher there because you're taking a tribal out of the 16th century, 6th century, and trying to make them into a modern democracy, and it just isn't going to work. Yeah. So all in all, my personal perspective is Vietnam, of course, was an attempt to contain China. It was an important element of our foreign policy. We were told that China was going to go all over Asia, control the world from Asia, and somehow it had to be contained. After all, that's why Korea was fought. okay? And, you know, 500,000 North Vietnamese came, Chinese came down through North Korea in order to secure that land, and we fought them off. Yeah.
Chosin Reservoir.
Chosin Reservoir, the Marines were honored. They did a great job, even though they were frozen conditions. Yeah. Chesty Puller, yeah, quite a general. The Marine Corps has had some real generals out of combat, particularly through the islands of South Pacific.
Oh yeah, Alan, Matt.
Yeah, exactly. Well, what was the idea? The idea was to contain communism. Communism, the definition, is militant socialism. In other words, whatever means that the central government has, it will control the people and all industry. You own nothing. You can't even own your own personality or thoughts. It's really, the whole thing is people work for the government, which is totally contrary to why America got away from Britain. You know, the whole freedom here. France went into Indochina thinking they were going to save it, and also they wanted to do it because it was a colony for tea, rubber, and all sorts of minerals. They found out after 15 years of war that, we can't beat them at their own game. Yeah. The communists of China supported the North Vietnamese, and it even became a recognized country, North Vietnam, of both China and Russia. Yeah, this was in 1950. Yeah. The Cold War started as we tried to contain China. The North Vietnamese beat the French in 1954 in a major battle. Exactly, yes. And that basically said, oh, there's going to be a vacuum here. What's going to happen? Well, the Chinese were moving south, complete with all the weapons, and it was at that point where the U.S. was challenged, what are we going to do? And so Lyndon Johnson was forced to come up with a containment policy. He then left his office. The government was then literally won over by a young, strapping politician from Massachusetts, and President Kennedy, very flamboyant, but with a good head, had to continue the policy. And so we had a number of advisors for a few years, and then all of a sudden it really got hot. Yeah. The U.S. generals kept saying, well, we can win the war. You know, they weren't right. One would say, just as in Afghanistan, they lied. You cannot win the war. You're fighting a different type of war that you have not been trained for.
Yeah, it wasn't World War II.
Exactly, yes, sir. So then in January of 1968, here's where O'Neill comes in, was the Tet Offensive. And that Tet Offensive rolled all through, in fact, thousands and thousands of troops came out of tunnels into South Vietnam and basically terrorized the villages, one by one. You know, we would go by a village and you'd see one of the village elders hanging from a tree. That's what's going to happen to you if you sympathize with the Americans. It's very dramatic, very real. The whole idea was for America to create a national uprising from the South to, you know, win the hearts and minds of the people in order to take over their country. It never worked. The real hearts and minds were in the North Vietnamese. And that's true for both men and women. The women were critical in North Vietnam in creating tunnels, carrying ammunition, medical, a whole number of wartime activities. It's not unlike the Turkish, who would bring their women with them to war. It's a real situation. Battle of Hue was the provincial capital, the toughest first battle for the Marines there. The whole idea was that you have to control the urban area. The Vietnamese were dug in with snipers all over the town. The townspeople were frightened to death and basically just hid, and it became a model of urban warfare, the likes of which the Marines hadn't really faced in the past. So for us, it was one of, okay, here's our tactic. If that doesn't work, here's another tactic. And for me personally, that went over for about 2 weeks, almost 3 weeks, where we simply had to go structure to structure in a ambush mode, in a fire mode, in a blasting the building mode with heavy armor, ramming things with trucks. It became a pretty nasty situation. Now, all of that, of course, for me anyway, was part of my long trail from Da Nang north to Dong Ha, because our battalion had been assigned to run resupply convoys up at the DMZ. And that became quite an exercise in itself. There's nothing like running a vehicle at night in the rain when you can't see the enemy. You've got alternating trucks of fuel and ammunition. When one goes up, boom, 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 many go up. Casualties abound, a real tragedy. You know, how do you bring in helicopters to medevac during the rain in the dark? Pretty tough, pretty tough. We have to basically turn a vehicle into a mobile hospital and get our wounded Marines back. So pretty nasty.